Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I just have to full screen you for a minute because there's a Lancers jersey behind you, which
Yes.
I know is from Windsor, Ontario, the city that I am sitting in currently, that I was born and raised in. How do you have a Lancers jersey on the wall behind you?
Well, actually, so I'm at a buddy of mine's house, and actually, this is his Lancer jersey. I don't know. I have a Lancers practice jersey, but I didn't finish up at the University of Windsor. But I actually started out my collegiate career, both academically and athletically, at the University of Windsor. I played. I was on the basketball team at Windsor from like 2006 to I think I left around 2008 and came back to the States. I'm originally from Rock Island, Illinois, which is about 3 hours west of Chicago. But yeah, I spent like 2.5 years in Windsor and all around Canada because we would travel to play games mostly around Ontario. Like I've been to pretty much almost every big and little city within Ontario, and then also we went to Halifax for nationals back in the day. And yeah, I mean, I've always had a great like love and appreciation for Canada, and like right now I'm in Toronto, so I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
You that means we know all the same bars, all the same downtown spots, all the same restaurants, and you will be one of the few people who can appreciate with knowing it. When I say I'm looking out my window and Detroit is, I can see Detroit out my window a block away. You
Mhm.
understand how close it is with that river separating the two countries. Yeah.
You want to know something funny? Like, so I had two phones when I was in Windsor, and I had my Canadian phone, and then I had my American phone.
Yeah.
And then whenever I wanted to make calls to like my family or American friends, I would go to the riverfront and park at the riverfront because I would get a signal. I think I was with Sprint or
Yep.
something. I could get a Sprint signal from the riverfront from Detroit. So
I
like,
still get my T-Mobile signal right now from Detroit. I'm playing the same game. Anyways, we're deviating. We're here today
mhm,
to talk about you. You're a filmmaker, writer, director primarily. On
mhm.
this particular project, you were cinematographer. So how did you get involved in Breathe? Tell us a bit about the history of the project.
Well, so I went to Loyola Marymount
Hmm.
University for grad school, and Jonathan Rowan, the writer director of Breathe, I think he was a year or two, behind me in the grad program. But when we met, we really hit it off, and we became great friends and colleagues. And this Breathe was a passion project for him,
Hmm.
and it was something that was outside of the structure of LMU. So this was like, one thing I can say about John is that like he can really bust out films. Like
Yeah,
he's
I've,
like
I've I've seen a lot of his stuff on Reveal.
it's like
Yeah.
one film after the next, and that's something that's really great about him being a filmmaker, is that he's just constantly putting work out
Yeah.
there. So this was one of those projects, and he said, hey, do you want to be a DP for this? And I said yeah, sure, like what do you need, like, and then so yeah, I think we were shooting on like just a simple like Canon DSLR,
Yep.
and we just went to work with what we had.
And that's to me, being a filmmaker myself, that's the spirit of it, is never limit yourself by waiting for a bigger budget, waiting for the best camera package, waiting until you can attach famous actors. The most important thing is to get out there and do it. And you as a basketball player will appreciate it even more. I don't
Mhm.
play sports, but I use sports analogies all the time of like, nobody gets to the NBA sitting on their couch talking about one day going to the NBA. You don't
Mhm.
get to the NBA by sitting on your couch watching basketball games. And
Mhm.
the same goes for filmmaking. You can watch all the movies you want. You can talk amongst your friends about all these great movies you want to make one day. But until you get off the couch, leave your house, get a team together, and start practicing, you've got to put in those 10,000 hours. There's nothing better than actually doing it. So, yeah, I've had a chance to see, Jonathan's work on the site. Love what he's doing and how much of his content is on Reveal. So it's interesting to hear a collaborator's perspective of just how much he cranks it out, because it seemed obvious to me, but you never know, because that feels like that was all made in a short amount of time as well. That he's just constantly working. When you're looking at Breathe, did you have an approach designing the visual style for the film? Like, what was your approach as a cinematographer to add to the script that he had?
I think for me, every time, so like myself as a writer director, I want to always design it myself as a writer director, and then I want to collaborate with the DP on, like, how we can make it happen. And I think that was kind of the process with me and John. John had a specific look that he wanted. He had a specific visual design that he wanted, and I just kind of came along and helped them bring it to life. And if something was not happening or clicking on the set, then me and him would game plan and saying, like, would
Yeah.
this be effective? Like, would this work for you? Because it was all, because like you said, like, without the resources or the time, you kind of have to think on your feet, and you have to be versatile. You have to be able to adapt. So
Mm-hmm.
my whole thing was, I'm very much a kind of more like a realistic, like, docu type of shooter when it comes to my narratives. So I just kind of approached it with John, and John had the same idea with it as well. Like, we didn't want to make it too stylized or anything like that. We wanted to be very, very real to the, like, I guess you could say, like, we wanted to be realistic. We wanted to be true to the story.
Is
Was
it the
kind of the
term they
approach.
use? Is it cinema verite when you talk about filmmaking that's done in a realistic style? So a lot of handheld and just I'm a big fan of that too. Most of my work is stories about real humans, about real characters that I want the audience to feel that reality. So trying to ground the visual style, it's not fancy crane shots and constant dolly shots and everything. It's just what the camera is just there with the characters, letting the acting and the script tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's exactly what it is, and that's it. That's pretty much what we did. We used whatever ambient or available light that we had available, like, that we had at our disposal. Like, we used practicals if need be. Like, if we had to, I think there was probably one point that, like, we had to get like an LED light bulb just to change it out, just
Yeah.
so it could give us a cleaner light instead of like going to tungsten. Like, so we kind of just worked in that way. And like, it's interesting because, like, when you look at certain, like, DPs, like someone like Deakins, for example, like Deakins, the funny thing
Oh,
about Deakins,
I have to pray, right? Because we said deacons. Yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Deakins, like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, someone like Deakins is like, what I learned recently is, like, Deakins bounces. Like, he just takes, like, he could take like a
Yep.
2K or something, and he just bounces, and he does this cove lighting where he sets up muslin in, like, kind of like a cove, like, setup, and then he just bounces a 2K, and then you just get that bounce, and then that's what he uses. Like, I think he used it for No Country for Old Men in a lot of scenes
And
that
and
he
I'll
did.
break that down for the any audience out there that's not a cinematographer or necessarily knows the details of filmmaking. Bounce is essentially when you set up your lights, but you don't point the lights directly at the actors or the subject. You point them into some sort of reflective surface or just off the walls, and the light, and then the bounce, the light that is bouncing off of those subjects are hitting. So you get a bit of a softer fill. It makes things feel more natural typically. But yeah, I mean, and Roger Deakins, if you don't know, like you mentioned, No Country for Old Men, 1917, Blade Runner 2049, The Shawshank Redemption. The man is responsible for some
Mm.
of the most epic and fantastic cinematography in the history of the craft. And yeah, and it's great that, and I find that so Deakins is a hero, and any other sort of visual inspirations that you pulled from when thinking about, because again, Breathe is very heavy subject matter, talking about
Mhm.
suicide and depression.
Mhm.
And I think as filmmakers, anytime we tackle subjects like that, there's a responsibility to tell the stories honestly and realistically.
Mhm.
These are problems that people battle every single day. Any other visual styles, filmmakers that you and Jonathan worked to create a visual look for this film?
I don't remember. I'm kind of drawing a blank as far as, like, Jonathan's, like, inspirations, but I think we had a similar one in Bradford Young. And Bradford
Mhm.
Young really likes to play with like contrast, like between light and dark, playing with light and dark, so nothing is just fully evenly lit.
Mhm.
But I mean, like, we didn't have, like, say for example, and I keep on throwing out these, like, cinematography terms, but we didn't
Yeah.
have like negative fill to like kind of
Yep.
like black out, to cut down on ambient light or
Yep.
bounce. But I think just kind of like the feel and the style of how Bradford shoots and what he shoots, and especially being like a black cinematographer, and
Mhm.
we had an all black cast within Breathe. Just kind of like how to compose like each shot in a very like visceral way. So I think that was kind of going in my mind at the time. So yeah.
When when you write and direct a project, you're in control of it in the edit room and making the decisions on the music and everything. You sort of are guiding the ship and know how the film is going to turn out essentially. When
Mhm.
you're working as a cinematographer, what was your reaction? What was your thought when you saw the way that Breathe all came together?
I was very happy with it. I know, like, it's always a thing where it's like, the first cut is always like just trying to piece the story together, to
Mhm.
see, and then like the second cut is to how the story flows, and then every cut after that to me is more so just like tweaking, like what can feel stronger, like, so it's just like it's always a process. But as Breathe was coming together, I think for me, when Breathe started to come together very well in the edit, was when John started to work with sound, as
Mhm.
well as color correction. And when he started working with that, it was like, yeah, I'm feeling it more and more. Like, because, like, I understand the process, because I'm also, not only a filmmaker, I'm also a part-time professor
Okay.
in a film school. So it's like, so I see different cuts of students doing things every single day. But at that time, like, I was a student. So, but even then, I could still see that it was a work in progress. But it really came together for me when sound was starting to be put together, and I think John did very well taking his time with the cut. Not letting anyone rush him with
Yeah.
the cut, because I think that's where it started to really come into its own.
And it's true. Sometimes as filmmakers, we do need to sit and let things breathe a little bit or take some time away and then come back and look at the edit. And if you are allotted that, if you have the fortune to take that extra bit of time, it can make a world of difference, because sometimes if you're just in it, you can't see the forest for the trees, as the expression goes. You're not able to pull back and have a objective view of it. And then sometimes you get to the finish line, you go, oh, I should have changed that. I could have done this. I could have done that. So it's great to hear that those those things were available to him. Where do you teach at, and what do you teach?
So I this past year, I or semester, I teach at the Pratt Institute in
Okay.
Brooklyn, New York, and that's where I'm based in, is in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
because I've since moved out of LA after 20, let's say after 2020, because we're still in the pandemic. But
I'm in the same boat. I know it well. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's like I teach there. I teach a class called Technical Practices, and basically it's a foundation class where I teach students how to use like basic equipment like camera, lighting, sound, et cetera, et cetera. Next semester I'll be teaching the same class, and then I'll also be teaching a class called Digital Cinema, which is basically a cinema class for non-film majors. So it's just basically going over everything film and cinema.
So you're writing and directing your own projects. You're
Mm.
working in the commercial world. You do cinematography for other people's projects, and you teach. Is there something we're missing? Oh, and you play basketball. Yeah.
And I play basketball,
Yeah.
and then also, I do a lot of work with my family's nonprofit, and for the past like 7-8 years, which
Hmm.
which um which actually fits in with my teaching background, because for the past 7-8 years I have a program in my hometown of Rock Island, Illinois, or the Quad Cities, called Urban Exposure, where it's like an
Hmm.
8 to 10 week film program for young people within my community that have no experience with film.
Oh, wow.
And then they come out filmmakers and they come out with their own short films. And a few of them have gone into festivals and actually gone on to film school and are like
That's awesome.
working. So it's like, so I've always just been kind of around film for the longest.
This is what I always say when I have the opportunity to educate young people and work with communities that don't necessarily have exposure to filmmaking. I just tell them all on day one, I'm like, look, there's a very real chance that I'll be working for you one day,
Yeah.
because I'm just a guy trying to do it and I have some talent, but like there's nothing stopping you from being more talented and more motivated. And one day you'll be hiring me to like grip on your set. So it's I think that's a fascinating. The world needs more people like you that are willing to give back to their communities and see that the next generation gets all the opportunities. And we do live in a fascinating time where if you have an iPhone and you have a MacBook, you are a filmmaker. There's nothing stopping you from making the same level of film that's out there that the studios are doing. You just have to want it bad enough.
Hmm.
Jonathan, that's all the questions for today. I just think everybody out there, if you're watching, if you don't know what Reveal is and you found this on YouTube or Facebook or somewhere else, go to reveal.net, sign up. It's a free account. It's a wonderful streaming service. There's all kinds of content on there and you don't have to pay. There's no monthly subscription fee. There never will be a monthly subscription fee. And you can see the short film Breathe that we're talking about, which is a very important story about one man's battle with mental health and suicidal thoughts. And I just think it's a beautiful film. I love hearing these stories and talking to creators about how the films came together. It inspires me to go back and rewatch them and see if I catch anything new that I didn't catch the first time hearing the story. So, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us, and best of luck on your adventures in Toronto.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always great to talk to a fellow Canadian. So, well, not a fellow Canadian. I'm honorary Canadian.
Honorary Canadian.
So I'm
Yeah.
not truly Canadian, but it's always great to talk to Canadians. Love them.